Dean Martin was halfway through That's Amore when he saw the gun. Not pointed at him, not yet, just resting on the table in front of a man in the front row. A man whose name you whispered in Las Vegas never spoke out loud. Dean stopped singing. The band kept playing. The audience held its breath. And then Dean Martin did something that would either make him a legend or get him killed. He walked straight toward the mobster and handed him the microphone. This is the story of the night Dean Martin proved that courage doesn't come from a gun. It comes from knowing exactly who you are. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand Las Vegas in 1965. It wasn't the family-friendly tourist destination it is today. It was a city owned and operated by organized crime. The Sands Hotel, where Dean performed regularly, was partially owned by crime families. The Rat Pack knew the rules. You performed, you entertained, you kept your mouth shut, and you never, ever crossed the men who really ran the town. Dean Martin understood this better than most. He'd grown up in Steubenville, Ohio, where organized crime was just part of the landscape. His father had worked in a barber shop that was a front for illegal gambling. Dean knew these men. He knew how they thought. He knew what they were capable of. But Dean also had something most people didn't have. He had a complete lack of fear when it came to performing. On stage, Dean was untouchable, not because he was arrogant, but because he genuinely didn't care about impressing anyone. If you didn't like it, that was your problem. On June 18, 1965, that attitude would be tested in a way nobody could have predicted. The trouble started 3 days earlier. Dean was in his dressing room at the Sands when there was a knock at the door. His assistant, Jackie, opened it. Standing in the hallway was a man in an expensive suit. Jackie's face went pale. "Mr. Martin," the man said, "Mr. Antonelli would like to speak with you after your show tonight, in private." Dean looked up from his magazine. "Tell Mr. Antonelli I'm pretty tired after shows these days. Maybe another time." The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Antonelli insists." Dean stood up and walked to the door. "Tell Mr. Antonelli that Dean Martin doesn't take meetings with people who send messengers. If he wants to talk to me, he can come to my dressing room himself and ask nicely." The man stared at Dean for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll deliver your message." After he left, Jackie was shaking. "Dean, do you know who that was? That was Vincent Antonelli's guy. You can't just blow him off like that." Dean shrugged. "I can and I did. I don't work for the mob, Jackie. I work for the Sands." Vincent Antonelli wasn't just connected to organized crime. He was one of the most feared enforcers in the Nevada crime family. He had a reputation for violence that even other mobsters found excessive. When Vincent Antonelli wanted to meet with you, you met with him, period. But Dean wasn't interested. He dealt with tough guys his whole life. He'd learned that if you showed fear, you were finished. So he didn't show fear. The next night, the same messenger appeared. "Mr. Antonelli is waiting downstairs." Dean was taking off his bow tie. "Tell Mr. Antonelli I already left for the night. But Mr. Martin, you're right here." "Am I?" Dean said with a smile. "Could have sworn I left 10 minutes ago." Jackie was beside himself. "Dean, you're going to get yourself killed. You have to talk to Frank." But Dean refused. "I'm not getting Frank involved, and I'm not meeting with some thug who thinks he can snap his fingers and I'll come running. I'm Dean Martin. I don't run for anybody." On June 17th, word spread that Vincent Antonelli was angry. Very angry. Dean's manager, Herman, came to his dressing room. "Dean, I'm begging you. Just take the meeting. 5 minutes. What does he want?" Herman hesitated. "It has something to do with his girlfriend, a dancer at the Tropicana. He thinks you'd been encouraging her to leave Vegas." Dean laughed. "I've never even met the girl. It doesn't matter if it's true. Vincent believes it. Just apologize." But Dean was stubborn. "I'm not apologizing for something I didn't do. If Vincent Antonelli has a problem with me, he can bring it up like a man." Herman left, shaking his head. He knew this situation was about to get very dangerous. June 18th, 1965. Dean arrived at the Sands around 6 for his 9 o'clock show. The atmosphere was tense. At 8:30, Jackie came to his dressing room looking terrified. "Dean, you need to cancel tonight's show." "Why?" "Vincent Antonelli bought out the first 3 rows, him and about 20 of his guys. They're out there right now." Dean didn't even look up from adjusting his bow tie. "So they paid for tickets. That makes them audience members like anybody else. Dean, they're not here to watch you sing. They're here to send a message." Dean turned to face Jackie. Then I guess I better put on a good show. At 9 o'clock, Dean Martin walked onto the stage of the Copa Room. The room was packed with 2,800 people. There was tension in the air. Dean looked out and immediately saw them. The first 3 rows filled with men in dark suits, and in the center of the front row sat Vincent Antonelli. He was a big man, probably 250 pounds, with a face that looked like it had been in 100 fights. His eyes were cold, and he was staring directly at Dean Martin. Dean smiled. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Sands." He nodded to the band and started singing "Ain't That a Kick in the Head." Dean sang with his usual casual grace, but his eyes kept drifting back to Vincent Antonelli. The mobster wasn't clapping, wasn't smiling, just staring. Dean finished the first song. The audience applauded enthusiastically, except for the first 3 rows. They sat in silence. "Thank you," Dean said. "Although I notice some of you in the front rows seem a little quiet. I know it's hard to clap when your hands are busy." A few people laughed nervously. Vincent Antonelli's expression didn't change. Dean moved into "Memories Are Made of This." About halfway through, Vincent Antonelli reached into his jacket. Dean's voice faltered for just a second, but Antonelli wasn't pulling out a gun. He was pulling out a cigarette. He lit it slowly, never taking his eyes off Dean. Then Antonelli did something that made the entire room uncomfortable. He drew his finger slowly across his throat. Dean saw it. The band saw it. People saw it. A murmur went through the crowd. Dean stopped singing. The band trailed off into silence. Dean stood at center stage, looking directly at Vincent Antonelli. The room was completely silent, 2,800 people holding their breath. And then Dean smiled. "Folks, we're going to take a little break here. There's a gentleman in the front row who seems to have something he wants to express. And you know me, I'm all about giving people a chance to express themselves." He started walking toward the front of the stage. The audience tensed. Vincent Antonelli sat perfectly still. Dean reached the edge of the stage. "Sir, I notice you've been sitting there making gestures at me all night. I'm not sure if you're trying to tell me something or practicing your sign language, but either way, it's a little distracting." The room was dead silent. "So here's what I'm thinking. If you've got something to say, why don't you come up here and say it?" Dean knelt down and extended the microphone toward Vincent Antonelli. "Why don't you come up here and sing? You seem like you might have a nice voice. What do you say?" Vincent Antonelli stared at Dean for a long moment. His face was expressionless. Everyone who knew him knew that this was the most dangerous moment. This was when Vincent Antonelli decided whether to kill you or not. The silence stretched on. The entire room waited. And then something incredible occurred. Vincent Antonelli started to laugh. It wasn't a friendly laugh. It was cold, calculating, but it was a laugh. "You got balls, Martin," Antonelli said. "I'll give you that." Dean smiled. "Is that a yes on the singing? Because the acoustics up here are pretty good." Antonelli shook his head. "Nah, you keep singing, Dean. That's what you're good at. You sure?" "The offer stands." "I'm sure," Antonelli said. Then he added, "Keep doing your thing, Dean. You're all right." Dean walked back to center stage. "Well, folks, looks like I'm going to have to finish this show myself. But before we continue, let's have a round of applause for my friend in the front row. He's a tough critic, but a fair one." The audience applauded nervously. Vincent Antonelli raised his glass in a mock toast. Dean launched back into his performance. For the next hour, he sang and joked as if nothing had happened. Vincent Antonelli and his men stayed for the entire show, and when it was over, they stood and applauded along with everyone else. After the show, there was a knock at Dean's dressing room. Vincent Antonelli was standing there, alone. "Can I come in?" Dean nodded. "Sure. You want a drink?" Antonelli walked in. "Yeah, scotch if you got it." Dean poured 2 glasses. They stood there for a moment, not saying anything. Finally, Antonelli spoke. "You know why I wanted to meet with you?" "Something about a dancer, I heard." "My girl. She's been talking about leaving Vegas. I thought maybe you were putting ideas in her head. I don't even know who your girl is. I know that now," Antonelli said. "Turns out she was talking about some other guy. Already took care of it." Dean didn't ask what took care of it meant. Antonelli took a sip. "The thing is, I sent my guy to talk to you 3 times. You blew him off every time. Made me look bad. I can't have that. So you came to my show to scare me?" Antonelli smiled. "Something like that. But you didn't scare, did you? I don't scare easy." No, you don't. Antonelli finished his drink. Here's the thing, Martin. I respect what you did tonight. Most guys would have pissed themselves, but you walked right up to me and handed me a microphone. That takes guts. Or stupidity, Dean said with a slight smile. Maybe both. Antonelli extended his hand. We're good, Dean. You and me. I respect a guy who stands his ground. Dean shook his hand. Appreciate it, Vincent. Antonelli headed for the door, then stopped. But Dean, next time I send someone to talk to you, maybe don't make them come 3 times. Deal? Deal. And just like that, it was over. What happened that night at the Sands spread through Las Vegas like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew. Dean Martin had stood up to Vincent Antonelli, and not only had he survived, he'd earned the mobster's respect. Frank Sinatra called Dean the next day. Are you out of your mind? Do you know what Antonelli could have done to you? He could have done a lot of things, but he didn't. Why didn't you just meet with him? Dean thought about it. Because if I had gone running the first time he snapped his fingers, I'd have been running for the rest of my life. These guys respect strength, Frank. If you show weakness, they own you. So I didn't show weakness. Frank was quiet. Then he laughed. You crazy bastard. You're either the bravest guy I know or the dumbest. Maybe both, Dean said. Years later, when Dean was asked about that night, he always downplayed it. People make too much of it. I just didn't want some guy in the front row ruining my show, so I addressed it. That's all. But those who were there knew better. They'd seen something rare. A moment when courage and composure in the face of genuine danger turned a potentially deadly situation into something else entirely. A moment of mutual respect between two men from completely different worlds. The microphone Dean offered to Vincent Antonelli that night became a symbol. It was Dean's way of saying, you want to be in charge? Fine, take over. But until you do, I'm running this show. And Vincent Antonelli, one of the most dangerous men in Las Vegas, had recognized that courage and respected it. That's the real story of the night a mafia boss threatened Dean Martin on stage. No gunfight, no dramatic escape, just one man refusing to be intimidated and another man respecting him for it. In the end, that's what made Dean Martin a legend. Not just his talent, not just his charisma, but his absolute refusal to bow to anyone, no matter how powerful or dangerous they were. Dean Martin was the king of cool, and on June 18, 1965, he proved exactly why. This is Dean Martin Legacy Stories. If this story gave you chills, hit like and share it with someone who needs to see what real courage looks like. Subscribe for more untold stories of the man who never backed down. Until next time, keep swinging, pal.